Please join me in welcoming back to St. Christopher's Mr. Clarence McGill.
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, how many people were here a couple months ago and saw our presentation when everybody was here? Most? Okay, good. Well, let me first start by thanking the head of the school, Mr. Leckie, and I want to thank Dr. Hudson, who's not here, but please tell her I recognize her because she'll kill me. So, and Mrs. Pohanka, Zimandera, Mrs. Zimandera, and the St. Chris staff. And I want the boys that have sat with me to plan this to stand up. Get the little planning, your planning group, they stand up. I want to thank these guys, and I want you to look at these guys for a minute, because we're talking about a sense of leadership. These guys planned this thing, and they thought about you at all times. What would you think? What do you want to do? Who's going to fall asleep? Who's not? I saw you on. So I want you guys to give them a big hand, and I'll talk to them later. Give them a big hand. Now, one of the things, and I'm going to be walking around, that's why I got my running shoes. One of the things that the group wanted to talk about is a question. A question. Now, you saw the videos to whet your appetite in terms of some of the subject matter we're going to talk about. Because we're going to talk about the boycott, the Syracuse University boycott that I was in 1969, 1970. But we're also going to compare that to the University of Missouri boycott of 2015. That's about a year, a little more than a year ago. Your generation, my particular boycott was in another generation. You guys weren't even alive. You ain't even thought about it. So the questions that we're talking about that these gentlemen wanted to, highlight is how far have we come? And these are race issues we're talking about. And how far do we have to go? And I want you to feel comfortable. Because we're talking about race. You're sitting up here, you guys, I see the brothers in here, and it looks like St. Chris has about 5%, 4 or 5% African American. I bet you, got around 45 to 50 people. 40, and I was in a similar environment, but we had girls. But my particular school had about 3 or 4% African American. And I was elected by my peers as president of the school. So during my time in high school, we didn't have any really anecdotal or institutional or systematic racism like they do in the South, or like they did in the South, past tense. So when I talk in terms of my frame of mind, that's in a sense where I'm coming from. Now, when we looked at Dr. King's sermon, Dr. King talked about the drum major instinct and do we want to lead? And, we know some of our friends, they talk trash and they want to lead and they talk and you think back in your mind, well, they don't know what they're talking about. But you notice that Martin Luther King said that Jesus did not rebuke John and James for them wanting to be prominent. What he said was, greatness comes from humble servitude. So that is one of the things that Martin Luther King said. And also Martin Luther King said 2 months, and this particular speech was 2 months before his assassination. He was going to be a dead man in 60 days. And he also said, let me be a drum major for peace. Let me be a drum major for righteousness and justice. And I'm going to hopefully parallel that with some of the things that we did in 1969. Again, I'm from upstate New York, Binghamton, New York. I was in a high school similar to this. And I graduated from high school and went to Syracuse University. I had some offers, of course, different offers. Some of you that play ball understand that. And I decided on Syracuse University mainly because of Jim Brown. Jim Brown's influence. Floyd Little recruited me, so that was one of the reasons. But nevertheless, when I entered Syracuse University, and again, not really knowing racism, now it could have been racism in Binghamton, I'm sure there was, but I wasn't confronted, and I didn't experience it. But when I went to Syracuse University, it was brutal. It hit me hard. And let's realize the time that I went to Syracuse University. Here are some of the different words and different circumstances that were going around in the late 60s. Martin Luther King got shot. Ted Kennedy shot. JFK shot. Malcolm X, we talked. Woodstock. Kent State. Vietnam. So this is what the turmoil was during that time, if you can imagine. And I'm missing many other things, but different people were dealing with different situations and trying to grasp what was going on in the country, along with dealing with their own self-character. So when we went to Syracuse University and I talked about some of the brutal racist experiences we had, in 1970, we decided to boycott the team. Now, realize, I'm saying this, so you can't say if I'm lying. But Cincinnati wanted me to be a high draft choice, Cincinnati Bengals. And I didn't play my senior year, so they contacted me after my junior year. So, and other team members were recognized for their collegiate athletic skills also. So I have to make a decision. When I'm going through this, do I want to sacrifice? And guess who told me that you're going to sacrifice everything? Jim Brown. Jim Brown came to our school during that time and sat with us. He stayed with us for 1 week. And we palled around with Jim Brown for 1 week. Played basketball, he took my money and all this. And I asked him to give me my money back. He said, no, I'm just a poor kid. But nevertheless, the last night before he left, he sat us all down. He said, gentlemen, you're doing something here and you're going to sacrifice your pro career. I'm giving you tonight to think about this, talk about this. And when I come back in the morning, you give me your answer of what you're going to do. So that night, we stayed up all night, 8 of us. And when he came back that morning, we said, we're going to follow through with this boycott. Why? Were we drum majors? What we said is that we are not going to allow any future ball players behind us to experience what we're experiencing. And what are we experiencing? The lack of academic equality in terms of counseling. My counselor was the defensive end coach. What did he know about academics? But he wanted me to stay eligible. So they allowed us to, deal with a curriculum that really wasn't going to matriculate you in a decent category, decent subject. So I had a whole trick. I said, hey man, I told them all freshman year, give him the stuff, write it out in pencil. Once he signs it, take it back, erase it, put out a pencil, go about your classes. So that's why we have a PhD from University of Wisconsin. That's why we have those gentlemen up there, an attorney. That's why we have one person that led the finance and banking arena for the state of Connecticut. I graduated from the Maxwell School, one of the top schools of citizenship in the country. So we had to think like that, but we had to deal with that. Number two, we wanted better medical treatment. We had a doctor who was running the medical piece, a football program that was a gynecologist. He knew nothing about dealing with athletes. Plus, he was documented to say he hated touching black people. Now, can you imagine? He said he hated touching black people. And guess what? First thing I said, you look at somebody and say, I don't like him. Right from the beginning, you've been there. So when I saw him, I said, I'm not going to get hurt. I don't care what happens. I don't know what happens on this field. I am not going to get seriously hurt. And I didn't. Because I wasn't going to let that guy get near me. The third thing we wanted was merit. We wanted our playing time to be based on merit, not color. I could go back and talk about how athletics was in the 1960s and 1940s. Certain black people weren't allowed to score touchdowns in the University of Alabama if you were from up north. You couldn't do certain things. You couldn't be on the field. There was a lot of things that happened during this time. And matter of fact, there was 150 athletic demonstrations during that era. And, some of the universities that were involved were University of Washington, University of Texas at El Paso, Princeton, University of Wyoming, Indiana University, Buffalo State, University of Pittsburgh, University of California, and Oregon State. But there were many demonstrations going on. So I just want you to get that scope. And the fourth thing that we wanted, fourth demand we made, we wanted a black coach. Syracuse never had anybody of any color in their athletic office since its inception of sports, which is 1898. So with that in mind, that's what we did. Now, during that boycott, which you can imagine was a tumultuous time, the university had 2 investigative reports at the time that we were boycotting. One was from the New York State Human Rights Commission, and the other was from Syracuse University by the chancellor. Both reports verified that there was institutional racism within the football program at Syracuse University, and the university promised to go forward and do something about it. In retrospect, the university did not go forward. The football coach had the chance to fire. Our football coach was named Ben Schwartzwalder. He was the #1 coach. He was like the Nick Saban of the time. But he won a national championship. Now, gander this. He coached the first black Heisman Trophy winner in the country, Ernie Davis. And we came up 10 years later, and this was 1959, and we came up 10 years later and said, he's got a racist policy. So you can understand that we have 2 trains of thought here, and those trains of thought are active even today. Even today. And I'm old, I'm 67. So we have a coalition over here still with us, and we have a coalition over here at Syracuse University still dealing with the past. Well, the question, again, and I want to keep this alive, were we drum majors for justice, righteousness, and peace? Did we lead the parade? And as I mentioned, 150 schools or more, we think, followed suit. Now, I graduated in 1971, I think. Went on to graduate school at Howard University. Had children. My son, I think, went to Trinity, play football and basketball. Right now, he graduated from William & Mary with a master's in accounting, and having worked at the Virginia Department of Juvenile Justice, dealing with all the incarcerated youth for many years. So I retired. So I got a call in 2006 saying, hey, We want you to come back here, and we want to give you the Medal of Extraordinary Courage, which is the highest honor given to people at Syracuse University. I said, what? You want to do what? I hadn't returned to Syracuse since the day I walked out, since I graduated. So, very lovely ladies, Nancy Cantor, who was the chancellor at that time, she's at Rutgers now, she gave us and celebrated our experience, officially apologized to us, and gave us the Medal of Courage. That was a nice moment, and please be mindful that some of the people that received the Medal of Courage, Joe Biden, our vice president, received the Medal of Courage, and he is a Syracuse graduate. Now, what I'd like to get to now, and I'm going to be brief, that last peace video, you saw the Missouri boycott. Now, when you saw the piece, how many people sort of saw that or was exposed to that information for the first time here? And you can raise your hand, that's all right. So, okay. So I'm glad we showed it. And again, I'm going to do some questions and answers after this. And even if you don't understand what I'm saying now, you can interrupt me and ask a question. But I want to make you comfortable about talking about race relations today. Because the problem that we have today is that we're not talking about race relations. And I give those guys credit that stood up, and I give Dr. Hudson credit for the Center to Study of Boys, and I give you credit because I go to different schools, and I don't see these emotions at different schools. This is a positive thing that we're doing. And, I coach basketball, and I got sons your age, so I deal with the fellas. So, and I understand the strain sometimes of dealing with race relations. My coach, Ben Sportswater, he spouted racial slurs every day. Every day he would say a racial slur. It would be about a Polish person, an Italian person, a black person, every day. Nobody admits it. Tommy Coughlin won't admit it. I played with Tommy Coughlin. Larry Zonka won't admit it. But everybody knows that Ben Sportswater said racial slurs every day for his 30 years. Don't you deal with racial slurs. Females, males, black, white, green, or purple, do not deal with racial slurs. It doesn't make you a big man, and it's not right. As Martin Luther King, morally wrong. And if your buddies deal with racial slurs, say, hey man, don't do that. Or don't do that around me. You can't do anything what he does or she does in a different environment. But don't do it around me. Now we're talking about drum majors. All right? Okay, so what I'd like to do now is talk about the University of Missouri. And again, keep this message in the back of your mind. How far have we come and how far do we have to go? Now, our boycott, 1970. University of Missouri, 2015. 45 years later. 45 years later. Half you get, that's not even 1/4 of your age. Okay, let's talk about, and I'm going to give you a backup. The geographic location of University of Missouri is Columbia, Missouri, Syracuse, New York. Columbia, Missouri is nestled in the Ozark Mountains. Syracuse is nestled in the Catskills. Now, and I'm going to talk about urban schools and schools that aren't urban. What's an urban school? Give me a sample of urban school. Urban college. Urban. VCU. Temple. University of Pennsylvania. Drexel. I mean, you go on and on. But then there's other schools that are nestled in the hills, other schools that are apart. And University of Missouri and Syracuse were nestled apart. University of Missouri was created in 1840, and it was the first public school created inside the Louisiana Purchase. Syracuse was created in 1870, and guess what Syracuse was created for? To educate blacks, Native Americans, and women. That's what Syracuse University, that's how Syracuse University started. To educate blacks, Native Americans, and women. Between 1921 and 1928, 25 blacks went to Syracuse University. Their first graduating class consisted of blacks, Native Americans, and women. Started by abolitionists. Now it turned, as life went on, it turned, but nevertheless, that's the way those schools started. And then Missouri's first black athlete was in 1956. Syracuse's black athlete was kind of interesting because they thought in 1930 a man named Wilmer Sadassan, it's a East Indian name, last name. So they thought he was East Indian. But his stepmother was East Indian. She was from Bombay, and his father was black. So he was an African American with an East Indian last name. And he was one of the greatest athletes, and they retired his number later. But once they found out that he was black, he was going to play in a championship game against the University of Missouri, University of Maryland, and they said, no, you can't play football anymore because you're black. Look it up. Everything I tell you, I want you to look it up. We're talking about being analytical. Don't believe me. You're here to be analytical. This is one of the better schools in the country because it focuses on analysis. And that's what you have to do as young students. You have to analyze. You have to say, hey, do I believe this? Hey, let me research this. No, maybe let me ask some questions. I want you to do that for your whole life. Ask questions. All right? So anyway, also, Syracuse in 1970, the population, the city itself, was about 21. It was about 200,000, and the black population was about 11%. University of Missouri, the black population was also 11% last year. So, and the economies were similar. In 1970, Syracuse's economy was pretty good, and Missouri's economy is good right now. But they deal with insurance. They have a lot of insurance companies and insurance headquarters. But as was stated here, the Missouri situation was the student body was mad at all the racial slurs that were going on. They were putting them on doors. Their president, Tim Wolf, of the University of Missouri, really didn't respond the way they wanted him to respond, so they continued it. And then Jonathan Butler, he boycotted, he had a hunger strike, and the whole university got behind him. And that's what I'm talking about. What were the differences and similarities in the Syracuse boycott and the University of Missouri boycott? And again, I wanted to do that, and these guys wanted me to do that because it really gives you a sense of current time. Now, the similarities are both schools were going to, our scholarships, our D1 football scholarships were jeopardized. Can you imagine getting a scholarship, a full grant and aid to Syracuse University? Might be, I don't know, might be $150,000 now. And you go home to your parents that we're poor and we're saying, we're going out the team, we're not playing anymore. And they're going to say, who's going to pay? Well, we weren't sure. Same thing with the University of Missouri. The University of Missouri had a situation like Syracuse that the local government got involved. Now, when some of you guys are going to law school, and when you deal with educational law is sort of separate from other law. And I'm talking about educational law, the laws on campus. You will rarely see a police car and that's why I talk about urban schools, but I'm talking about the other schools. You're going to rarely see a police car, say, on the campus of Cornell University, because they're up in the hills of Italy, because they have their own security staff. But the local government, the local police, and the school police, you really don't mix unless there's a situation a serious situation that you have to mix. So, Syracuse University, in terms of our boycott, you saw the riot. Riot on campus because of our situation, and some people got hurt. Similarly, the University of Missouri, a gentleman in the state legislature wanted a law saying that if you did not play football, it's a criminal act. So you could go to jail. If you say anything, and they tried to run that through their state legislature. So again, give you some insight about the differences and the similarities. Again, that's a similarity. Another similarity was the fasting of Jonathan Bucky. And in terms of Syracuse, we had a lot of students, co-eds, and other students back our particular boycott. And during that time, the late 60s, and some of us are old enough in here, I'm not going to tell anybody raising a hand, but some of us are old enough to have experienced the late 60s. See, you're looking at, I'm black history, so you're looking at black history. So you call me black history. But in the late 60s, a lot of students, and probably your mothers and fathers, some of them, supported, or your grandmothers and fathers, supported the actions that were happening in the schools because there was a moral imbalance that was happening at that time. All right, closing up here. What were some of the differences in Missouri and Syracuse? Well, if the University of Missouri didn't play that next game, they were going to lose millions of dollars. Millions, literally, because of TV rights. If Syracuse University didn't play their next game, and our next game was University of Kansas, John Riggins' Kansas, they weren't going to lose a dime. Number two, there's about 100 players on the University of Missouri, approximately, and 50% were black. We had about 80 or 90 people on our team, and there was only 10 of us that were black. So that was significant in terms of a boycott or any type of action, because half the team would be considered. Number three, there was solidarity between the black players, the white players, the school administration, the people in town, the pets, the dogs, the cats. Everybody was in it. And my point was that, and you might have, some of you that paid attention to it on television, I was kind of proud that the head coach said he's with the black players, and whatever they wanted to do, he was willing to do. And that was a true improvement in terms of our situation, where the white players signed a petition saying they wouldn't play with us. And you may recall that a couple months ago, I think Charles showed Joe Ehrman, and he was one of the white players. And later on in life, he understood what happened, and now he's a real proponent of the Syracuse 8 and everything that we do. But even Joe says his fellow players at that time that are my age dislike what he's doing. The And maybe the most important difference in terms of Syracuse University, our boycott of 1969 and University of Missouri of 2015, that book, Leveling the Playing Field, we had an opportunity to tell our story. You know, I wrote a chapter, everybody wrote a chapter. There's some history about Syracuse University football, the National Basketball League, because it came out of Syracuse, the Syracuse Nationals, all this stuff. But we had a chance to do it 35 years later. The University of Missouri situation came out in 35 minutes. Why is that? Social media, baby. Social media, the internet. And whether that was good or bad, we had some discussions about that in our group, and we can talk about it. But that was significant, and I think social media has its pluses and has its negatives. But in that regard, when the University of Missouri boycotted, it allowed the country to know what was happening immediately, and it allowed you, as viewers, to make a decision on whether it was good, bad, indifferent, what have you. And those type of things are good, again, in terms of knowledge of. Always have, and I'm going to close up here, but always have, I used to call the knowledge of what's going on. You don't have to necessarily tell everybody, like, the drum major instinct, I got the knowledge and I'm bad and I'm in this. You don't have to do that. But it's nice to have that information. And if nobody else has the information, so what? You have the knowledge of. In closing, it's ironic that Martin Luther King forecasted being remembered as a drum major for justice, peace, and righteousness, because again, it tragically came true 60 days later. You know, the sacrifices and the gains and losses involved with the Syracuse 8 boycott and the University of Missouri boycott beg answering this question that we've put out. How far have we come? And how far do we have to go? These questions must be answered either today or either during the future tomorrows. Thank you.
You guys have any questions for Mr. McGill?
Oh, don't be scared. Let me hear. Where are the drum majors? Come on, baby. Where are the drum majors? Give me any questions. Yes, sir.
How many of your teammates after you reconciled?
Man, that's really interesting because I haven't reconciled with any of them besides Joe Erner. Others have reconciled with a couple. DJ Harrell, who was an attorney in Boston, he gave me a story that a lot of guys are coming to him and say, hey, you guys were right, but we couldn't do anything, based on our situation. As I mentioned, Ben Schwartzwater and the football program had a petition, and I understand, and I don't know if this is true, that they compelled people to sign it. And that could be, but nevertheless, I want to talk. I'm one of the few that want to talk to every single athlete because they were my friends. We took showers together, not like it is now. Everybody high. We were wild. Those big, big giant showers. I mean, we ate together, we bled together, we beat people up together, and that's what it was. That's football. So, but unfortunately, there's still a big chasm between myself and them. Question. supposed to ask a question. You guys scared? Come on, give me a question. Who's gonna give me a question? Hey, my man. I got two. Okay.
This isn't directly related to what you're talking about, but what do you think about Black Lives Matter?
Well, the Black Lives Matter, I think, is just a phrase to say all lives matter. That's my perception. Currently, we're having some tough times here in America. And that's why I sort of trying to make that parallel of 1970 to 2015. Fellas, you're about to get into a reality show, and you're in it. You are about to be in a reality show because racial tensions are starting to rear up. Do you agree with me or do you not agree? Okay, good. So it seems like we're going to go back. Hopefully we don't, but it seems like we're going to go back to some racial tension. And you guys, I'm old, I'd be dead and gone. You guys would be right in the middle of it. So that's why I'm talking to you. You got to think about this. Obviously you guys think about where you're going to college, what you're going to do and this and that. But there's going to be some issues that you're going to have to think about. What's the situation racially? What am I going to do? Ed Gerard was a good friend of mine on the basketball court. Now, I go to school, he goes to Richmond, I go to Cornell. Now I'm confronted with this. If Ed was next to me, would I do that? Would I respond this way? So, Black Lives Matter is an organization, apparently. I don't know that much about it, but I know it's not a Black Lives Matter and nobody else is like it. That's not the way I think they want to define it, and I don't define it. As I mentioned, I was in an environment like this all my life, and I got to go back to my 50th later on this year, and I'm going to enjoy it. I love the folks I went to school with. My wife is from here. She was from the segregated South to a certain extent. And she always admired when I went to my reunion a few years ago. She said, man, you guys really love each other. That's what we were about. Another question. I hope I answered. Okay.
So were you teammates with Tom Coughlin?
Yeah, I whipped Tom Coughlin, but I wore him out. Tommy was the wingback, and I was the defensive end. So when you scrimmage, he was the wingback, and I was the defensive end. And Tommy played in the backfield with Floyd Little and Larry Johnson. With Floyd Little, Larry Johnson, and Tommy Parker. So, but Tommy was a thinker. I give him credit. He was a thinker. But he could, wingbacks in those days, they would always go in motion to get out of the way. Yes, sir.
Almost everything that's going on with racial now is broadcast to everyone who has anything to talk about. So what do you think is the effects of how this would change the racial and all that?
How to say this again now, one more?
How is
The media?
affect racial relations?
Good question. Actually, I should let Danita, because she's more into the media back there. Danita Green back there with Richmond Magazine, and she's more into. But this is why I'm really focusing on being analytical. What you hear in the media, what you read in the media, what you see, you must analyze it and make your own opinion. Because, it's real, it's great to start something and be involved in writing about it and being the lead writer if you make up a story, whether it's bad or good. And sometimes I feel newspaper reporters, journalists, etc., they want to make up some stuff just to say I was the lead. Now that's a big thing. I was around it a little bit, and that's a big thing to say, hey, I was the lead and so-and-so getting murdered. I was the lead and so-and-so breaking in, you know. And you guys just have to take it with a grain of salt. Now, some things are going to be obvious. Now, if somebody jumps off the Empire State Building to his death, I mean, that's obvious. He jumped off the State Building to his death. So, but in regards to race relations, and I really feel strongly that this time is here, and we, as honorable drum majors, in the positive perspective, need to look at what's going on, make the right moral choice, and be comfortable with the right moral choice. I made a choice. I made a choice not to play professional football. I got a couple of people who said, man, you're supposed to play football on Sunday. You're supposed to play football on Sunday. I was pretty quick. I was pretty good. But once Jim Brown left and once we started thinking about what do we need to do, I thought about everybody behind me. And the media was good to us to a certain extent because they knew Ben Swartzwell. They knew our coach. But on the other hand, you had two different factors. It's just the way it went. Next. Yes, sir.
As someone who played an integral role in the civil rights movement as an activist, we're coming to the end of Obama's presidency. Can you comment from your perspective on what having a black president has meant to the country and to race relations?
I think that Obama's presidency was, a breath of fresh air for black people. I think it was a breath of fresh air for all people. I thought that he was very sensitive to a lot of cares of the world. I thought he was, he's an international man, because he had that African descent. I thought he was pretty bright, obviously. I mean, you couldn't. One thing they didn't say about Obama that he was stupid. That's one thing you didn't get out. So. It was a proud moment for black folks. It was a proud moment. It should be a proud moment for everybody. Now, Donald Trump. I'm not against Donald Trump. I'm not against Donald Trump because, and I hear everything's everybody quiet. I like that. You want to hear an old black man what I'll say about Donald Trump. I like that. Look, I have nothing against Donald Trump. Donald Trump won the election. The transfer of power was peaceful. That is so significant. People say, but you guys, when you start traveling the world, you're going to understand when people have machine guns in the airport and you coming in. So it was peaceful. Now, what's Donald Trump going to do? Donald Trump's daddy was in the Ku Klux Klan. Apparently, in terms of the research, and don't beat me up because I had people beat me up on this, but he was arrested in 1929 at the Ku Klux Klan rally. That's not to say that Donald Trump is a Ku Klux Klan supporter or if he has Ku Klux Klan ideas. But what scares me, I've seen racism. I've seen hard racism. I don't think any of y'all may have, I don't know if y'all have seen hard racism and lived in hard racism. My wife will not sit in the back of anything because she had to sit in the back of the Hippodrome with her mother and father years ago. She couldn't sit up in front. I had a friend of mine, he worked at a hotel. But he became an all-star in high school. So the hotel he worked in, he walked into the front door. And his manager said, what you doing walking in the front door? You're supposed to walk around the back. So he was shocked, but the people in the program said, come on, Bill, come on, because we got to do this. He get up on stage. So he kept walking and walked on in. That Monday he went to work, he was fired. So these are the types of things I'm fearful of. And I see more and more racial negativity toward black folks rising under this Donald Trump situation. I am hopeful that Donald Trump addresses it. I'm sure he's going to have to say something, but I hope he addresses it in a way that will make all of us feel comfortable that he doesn't support these types of actions and that he's going to do something about it. Next question.
Mr. Gill, we're going to cut it off because these guys need to go.
Oh, well, I look like you guys are into it now. All right. That Donald Trump thing. I don't know.